1% of the population as a whole has an enormous amount of wealth, and 1/10 of that 1% possesses nearly all of it. In other words, the top 100 wealthiest people on the planet are comparable to the bottom 2.5 billion in terms of wealth. You may be right in thinking that is a terrible thing, but you must realize that this law regulates how creative the universe is distributed among all creative fields. It resembles a natural law in several ways. Welcome to the Wealth Builder Den, your way to financial freedom. We'll help you make good investments and informed financial decisions to build your wealth. Subscribe to the channel. We'll share investment tips and tricks on how to save money and becoming wealthy. Don't forget to click the notification bell to be updated. This will help you avoid wasting any more money. Now, let's get straight into the videos. Think about what takes place when you play Monopoly. If you've played Monopoly, the money all goes to one individual, right? You then engage in another Monopoly game. What transpires? All the money goes to one individual. It's actually the unavoidable result of numerous trades being made at random. So, if you take 1,000 individuals and ask them to participate in a trading game, you would give each of them, let's say $100 or $10, and instruct them to trade with one another by tossing a coin. If I win the coin toss, you should give me $1. You win and I'll give you $1. The game will end with one person having all the money and everyone else having none if we all play it long enough. Therefore, it is a deeply ingrained aspect of creative production processes, and no one really knows how to address it. The risk, of course, is that all of the resources go to a tiny minority at the top, while a sizable portion of the population sits at zero. But to attribute that to a particular system's oppressive nature is to grossly underestimate how complex the issue is. Since money tends to travel back up after being shoveled down, no one genuinely knows how to transfer resources from the minority that controls just about everything to the majority that has just about nothing in any consistent way. And it's a major issue. But the thing you need to realize about the 1% problem is that it all affects every single field where there is a variation in creative output. Number of compositions created, records sold, and records manufactured. Let's look at an illustration. The music that makes up 50% of the classical repertoire is created by 5 composers: Mozart, Tchaikovsky, Beethoven, Brahms, and Bach. Indeed, those 5. So that serves as yet another illustration of the scaling of price. It applies to a wide range of things, including the distribution of hockey goals scored. City sizes are distributed similarly. Therefore, people frequently discuss how unjust it is that 1% of the population has a disproportionate amount of wealth. 1% of 1% owns the majority of that wealth, and 1% of 1% of 1% owns the majority of that wealth. But it's a natural result of repeated trading gains, and we are unsure of how to combat it. We are unable to take from those who possess something and move it to the bottom without completely immediately rising to the top. Possibly with other people, but still returning to the top, because even the 1% has a lot of turnover. A 10% chance exists that you will be in the top 1% for at least 1 year of your life, and a 40% possibility exists that you will be in the top 10%. That is the case in the US and Canada, but less so in Europe, so the top end is churning quite a bit. The folks with money aren't always the same ones. However, the majority of wealthy individuals are always a tiny minority of the population. Anyhow, the reason I'm telling you about it is because after the peasants were given their land and began to become farmers, a very small percentage of them achieved great success, and they were even responsible for producing practically all of the food for Russia and Ukraine. The kulaks were this tiny minority of prosperous farmers who may have had a brick house, were able to hire a few people, had some land and some livestock, and were very productive people. This is what happened in the 1920s when Bloody Lenin came along and collectivized the farms. They classified them as socially undesirable individuals and deployed intellectual scouting parties into the city to collectivize the farms. Thus, the plan was for everyone to farm the land together while pooling their individual plots. And of course, the small group of individuals who were productive and had managed to own a sizable portion of the property had their land taken away. So you must consider how it might happen. After World War I, Russia was in a rather dire situation. Men who have experienced brutality and have PTSD, as well as many others who are not doing well at all, are prevalent in the communities. The bloody intellectuals then enter the town and advise everyone to leave because the prosperous farmers across the street, whom you've always been so uselessly envious of, are actually pigs and devils who are robbing you. We'll put together a cute little mob and take whatever they have. And indeed, that is what took place. And during the brutal winter, when they had nowhere to dwell or anything to eat, all of those people were either killed, raped, or sent to Siberia. Consequently, they all passed away. 6 million people in Ukraine died of starvation a few years later as a result of that. The concept of guilt based on class and ethnicity was thus fully developed and executed by the Soviets. The idea of race and ethnic-based guilt, for example, is currently being discussed widely in North America. It's a very horrible path to take, but it's one that we're currently very much involved in. And it's a terrible idea to accuse everyone in a group of anything simple because they belong to that group. Because everything you do is an investment in some sense. If you're used to keeping things hidden, you'll do the same with your investments. You constantly invest in some way, even though part of it can be measured in monetary terms. You're going to be in financial trouble if your character has been tainted by your continued attempts to mislead yourself about the nature of reality. There are people who spend money in ways that you wouldn't imagine they could in such a brief period of time because of sheer self-deception. In addition to having high IQ, being consensuous is another quality that increases your likelihood of becoming financially successful, say by the time you reach middle age. It appears that you can beat random over time if you have these two psychological features. It can be argued that this is also a matter of chance since there wouldn't be unconsensuous people if conscientiousness hadn't helped their survival at some point in the past. But those attributes do operate very well in this culture at this moment. Therefore, what constitutes defeating a system relies on the constraints you impose on it. Additionally, you may think the same thing about somebody if you consider his level of success. Okay, in terms of money? Okay, so how is his health these days? How's his marriage doing? How do his interactions with his kids go? What cost did he incur to get his wealth? You know, it might not be immediately obvious if that specific person won or lost when you add more factors to the review. One notion that pervades our culture on a regular basis is that poverty is brought on by a lack of resources. That's a terribly bad idea too, because managing money is incredibly difficult. Addicts were among Jordan Peterson's clients, and the worst thing that could happen to them was for them to inherit any money. That's all it takes for them. They were first and foremost hanging out with individuals who were somewhat sociopathic. So as soon as they received money, they headed to the bar with their friends, especially if they weren't that smart and couldn't defend themselves very effectively. They feel humiliated, appalled, and repent, and he then gets himself back together. After that, everything was okay, until he ran out of money and had to repeat the process until his next salary arrived. Therefore, it's not like having money is always beneficial for everyone. Money management is challenging. It can vanish with extreme ease. Nowadays, elderly individuals are in such a terrible situation because scammers constantly approach them online. Giving them money alone is equivalent to pouring water into their hands. So to speak, it might not be all that useful. At last, having a low IQ is obviously bad and contributes to poverty. Because having a high IQ seems so arbitrary, people dislike the concept of IQ. It's not like you exactly deserve it though. You are essentially set up in that manner from the beginning. If you don't educate someone with a high IQ to the extent of their potential, you can make them stupider. However, taking someone with a low IQ and attempting to raise that, it's like if you can figure out how to do that properly, it's time for you to win the Nobel Prize because people have attempted that a lot. And our society is becoming more sophisticated, so it's by no means apparent. Liberals believe that because there is unemployment, society isn't fair. And conservatives believe that everyone can find work. However, none of them considered that the vast disparities in people's aptitudes, far bigger than everyone realizes, pose structural issues. A volunteer position was secured for him by Jordan Peterson, which was much harder than you might imagine. For instance, you need to get a police check. An actual job is easier to land than a volunteer position. He folded letters or pieces of papers into thirds in order to fit them inside envelopes while working at a charity. The appropriate envelopes, which were also in a pile, had to be matched with the letters, which were then in a pile. However, some of them were English and some were French. Therefore, it was important to properly match the French ones to the French envelopes. He would next need to determine whether the papers or the letters were out of order and if there was one envelope that wasn't in the right place. Additionally, some of the letters had photos connected to them that you weren't supposed to bend, but the photos weren't always in the same spot. Therefore, you had to figure out how to fold the paper in a variety of ways without creases in the picture. The second issue is that until Peterson saw someone who couldn't place a piece of paper in an envelope, he was unaware of how difficult it is to do so. And his IQ was probably about 80. You wouldn't have any different impressions about him if you encountered him on the street. He appeared to be an average man. Now I hope you guys learned some useful information from this video. We appreciate you for staying till the end. Let us know what you think in the comments section below. Kindly click the like, subscribe, and notification bell icons if you think this video will help you in your future financial decisions. Visit our channel for more financial knowledge, building your wealth, and investment tips and tricks videos that you don't want to miss out. Have a great day and see you in our next video.